Welcome back to the FanSpeak Network and another episode of Sibling Showdown. This is, of course, the DFS Short Slate edition. So in just 1 minute, we are going to talk early only, afternoon only for this week, week 3. That is right. It is week 3, and we are ready to talk week 3 short slate. That is early only, afternoon only on DraftKings. Steve and I both love playing DraftKings short slates. Of course, DFS in general, but have had a lot of success in short slates. So we're going to talk it through. Steve, how are you doing? And what do you think about these short slates? Broken up a little better this week.
Yeah, it's broken up a little better. Obviously, still a lot of games on the early until we get to the buys, and a lot of big time quarterback decisions here. So I like it because it's what we always say. You can use short slates to play some quarterbacks when you weren't playing a main, and that's definitely something I'm going to look to do with the short slate. So I like that aspect of it. But yeah, overall, it's broken up a little better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know I have some quarterbacks I like in particular on each slate. And then, again, to your point, the nice thing about short slate and afternoon slate, early slate, afternoon slate didn't work for me last week is not only can you hedge off like what your main slate player pool or lineup construction is, you can also dodge things too, like last week, I did not play Alvin Kamara at all. So in Classic, you're donezo. In early only, you're donezo. But in after only, you're good. And I cashed in my afternoon only. So I cashed in my afternoon only with Kyler, who was the play. But you wanted a full Cardinals onslaught in the 3 games afternoon only. And I did not play Marvin Harrison Jr. Big whoops on that. So didn't get like any exciting cashes. But I did cash because I did have... what was it, Kyler McBride and maybe George, I can't remember, but you wanted like literally like 4 of them and the Cardinals defense. And that's what's great too, is like you can do weird, unique things. Like if it's a short, especially the short slates that's like 3 games, don't be afraid to onslaught. If there is one team that you think could just absolutely annihilate the slate like the Cardinals did last afternoon only, don't be afraid to get crazy like that for the especially shorter slates, and don't be afraid of an onslaught. That was what got people home for the big prize last afternoon only. I just wanted to point that out because it really is unique strategies that aren't really necessarily conducive for a full classic DFS slate. So, okay, so we're talking week 3 and we're talking early only first. So let's bring it over, and I've already got it queued up, Steve. So early only, I'll rip through the games really quick. We've got Giants, Cleveland, gross. Chicago, Indy, Houston, Minnesota, Philly, New Orleans. That's a good one. Chargers, Pittsburgh. We've got to watch Herbert's injury. Apparently high ankle. That sucks. We know that game's going to be Boomer City with a ton of runs. Passed over. Denver, Tampa. And then Green Bay, Tennessee. I would assume Love sits one more big week, but we got to wait on that. So, of course, as always, even in week 3, we're already waiting on a lot of injury information. Fun. But with that said, the games that stick out to me here, Steve, are Philly, New Orleans, and Houston, Minnesota. They stick out like a thumb to me. I think you could take some shots on teams like Chicago, or if you just wanted to hammer the running backs in the Boomer game, or Tampa Bay. Stuff like that, or like a piece from the other games. But again, Minnesota, Houston, and Philly, New Orleans stick out to me. Are those the 2 games that stick out to you in this early only?
Yeah, those are definitely the most interesting. There are some certain sides in some other games, like Tampa, that I really like. But Houston, Minnesota, we've seen both offenses click. Philly, we know the firepower they have even without A.J. Brown. And of course, New Orleans has been the talk of the town the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. I mean, they basically played barely 2 first halves, and then they take their foot off the gas pedal. So
Carr even just have like 19 attempts last week.
I think they didn't. I think he only had like 1 attempt in the last 26 minutes of the game or something like that.
Wow. We got our guy Spread in chat. Always good to see Spread. Check out Spread and Tyler's picks up on the homepage, fanspeak.com. Everything's free. NFL betting card is free. Their picks have been up and are up. And go tail them. And I should mention that on that page, you can also follow our Dub Club. It's a 7-day free trial. Links at the bottom, and it's also on their betting card. But check out their betting card, totally free. So with that said, Steve, so how are you going to approach this? I mean, obviously, I think Philly and New Orleans is going to be the chalkiest, but I think, you can get contrarian around it. Or I think one interesting approach I was thinking about, I wanted to run by you, is actually stacking either side, but the game of Houston, Minnesota. I know Minnesota's defense has been pretty tough, but I mean, anytime I can play Nico Collins, he's just proven himself to be the absolute alpha. I think that's interesting. So I feel like that could be like a fun game to kind of stack up and then just get pieces of New Orleans, Philly, Tampa, that kind of stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely Stroud and Nico is definitely one of my favorite stacks. I think their ownership won't be as high as it probably should be because people are starting to respect Minnesota's defense. But end of the day, you look at it, Stroud's been just so efficient. He hasn't had that like 400, 350, 400-yard game, but I think it's in his. We know from last year it's well in his bag, and I mean, Nico is just looking incredible so
Yeah.
far.
Yeah, and he was on the injury report, but I feel like it seems like it was
I
fine.
believe he
They felt
doesn't
it
have a
off. Yeah,
designation going into today.
no designation. That's great. So did you want to build that? And I will say that I don't mind taking a shot with, my guy Sam Darnold and Jefferson from the other side and bring it back with Nico. But did you want to build a Stroud stack to be a little more contrarian on this?
Yeah, yeah. Let's
Okay.
start with Stroud and Nico.
Okay. Well, do you want to start Stroud, Nico, Jefferson?
Well, that becomes tough. I do love Jefferson. I do think a cheap bring back is
Naylor is,
Jalen Naylor
yeah.
with
Yeah,
Addison out
just to
again.
throw, yeah, Addison's out. Naylor is only 4.4K. And what's Tank Dell this week? I think he could come in lower owned. If you wanted to just hammer this game, you could do that. And let me just throw in a cheap defense. What's the lowest viable defense that you see fit, Steve?
Lowest viable defense that I I like is probably the Bears at
I was to say, you
2,600.
could also do Tennessee if Malik Willis plays, but yeah,
Yeah.
let's throw in the Bears for sure. Then you're up to 4.9K. If you get a cheap tight end, then I think this is totally viable. Just wanted to show an example, and then we could certainly show another version of that. I mean, tight end's tough this week. I mean, obviously Hawkinson, Njoku not available. Goddard's 4.6, Schultz 4.3, and then there's to love. It's just kind of you got to squint to see it type shots. What did Akins do last week?
Not much. I think he only had one or two targets.
Yeah, just one for catch for 10 yards. So it's not pretty. So how would you handle tight end? That's just
So
a fair question.
tight end, it's definitely not pretty, but
Okay.
I think probably the most mispriced guy is Greg Dulcich. He had
Okay.
8 targets last week. He had 3 week 1, but his 11 targets are third on the team behind Cortland Sutton and Josh Reynolds. Reynolds is a little banged up. Knicks, unlike last week, which was more of a slog game with the Pittsburgh offense, I do think the Bucks can put up some points. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bo Nix is throwing 40 times this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of like taking a shot on Dulcich, who again has not only is he third in team targets, he's gotten every tight end target so far this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Who are your favorite? I know your favorite running backs are likely Barkley and Kamara. You may be able to get one in like this type of build, and then I don't know if you have to, go down on defense and then go. You could do Donta Foreman or something like along those lines. But who outside of Kamara and Barkley, who are your other favorite running backs on the short slate? Do you like Jacobs just for volume, even though Tennessee has a good run defense?
Yeah, no, Tennessee's run defense obviously shut down the Bears week 1, but last week the Jets, both running backs were running well on them. So I don't think it's maybe as formidable so far this year.
So you don't mind Jacobs.
I don't mind Jacobs.
Well, roll
I
through who you're considering outside of
so
Kamara and Barkley.
so other guys I like, Rashard White,
Mm-hmm.
who has a lot of pass game involvement. Also, I think the matchup's much better this week. Tony Pollard against Green Bay. Pollard
I
has
like that.
just dominated carries and targets
Mm-hmm.
for
16
Tennessee,
and 17 the first 2 weeks respectively,
and
and
then 6 and 4 targets.
yeah,
Yeah,
6 and 4 targets. Yep, I
and
actually
I
really like
believe
that.
Spears might be out this game.
Actually, I think he may have gotten cleared.
Okay,
He's
I know
questionable
he's
still. He's still,
questionable.
so he's
Okay,
still he did practice fully Friday. So questionable, but if with a practice, he's looking more likely to
now
play.
the
But
cheap play that doesn't really work. You can do it in this build. I wouldn't do it if we're doing both
Acres,
Collins and Dell. Is
yeah,
Akers.
yeah,
Um, so I would want to remove Dell probably if you're
yeah,
playing Akers.
yeah. And that's, so you could just mess around with the different types of builds. Obviously, you take out like Adele, throw in Acres, you're then have 6,200 for 2 spots, stuff like
Yeah,
that. Same thing if you wanted to, flip the build and so that you could jam in some pieces from the Philly Saints game. You could take out Stroud. I know you're not going to like this as much, but I do think it's proven viable, especially if they're playing from a negative game script. Throw in Darnold for $1,500, $1,600 cheaper, and then you can play like a Kamara and still have a viable. Again, then you can mess around with maybe then you throw in. Well, you probably don't want to throw in Akers, Nico, and Dell, but maybe you do. I don't know. Again, short slates are weird. You can get weird. You can overload one game. So I kind of like overloading or getting very involved in the Houston, Minnesota, and Philly, New Orleans games, and then just picking pieces. Tim in chat says it's gonna be tough with Kittle. I hope we get some clarity on that. That's afternoon.
yeah. It sounds doubtful. So
Okay, and that's why he says tight end is tough. And Dulce's has had so much potential. So yeah, I didn't realize he got that many targets that last week because I know you mentioned in the Underdog Battle Royale article. Check that out. All those articles are free on fanspeak.com. Check those out. We're in the Battle Royale streets, of course, as well. Andrew and Justin just did a show Wednesday night, so check that out. We're covering, of course, DFS, Battle Royale, sports betting. So we have it all covered here on Fanspeak Network. Free betting card, Dub Club, you got it covered every which way. So I think we covered this multiple ways, unless there's any other ways you wanted to approach looking at the early slate before we look at the afternoon slate, Steve.
no, just I do want to mention a couple just cheaper receivers
Yeah,
since we kind of hyper focused on one team.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
I
one
do,
game, yeah.
yeah, and I do like Josh Downs coming back from injury. I think they're going to have to get him involved
What's his
as we
price?
4,700.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, in that Philly game, I know it didn't work the first week, Josh Dotson, but another week maybe he gets more involved.
Ugh, I don't like
If there's targets, in a GPP, that's what you need to go for. Josh Reynolds, like I said, is one of the leading target getters, not only on Denver, but honestly out there. He's got 8 and 5 targets. There's a lot of high end receivers who can't match that so far. But one guy I really want to point to, Keenan Allen is out again. Rome Odunze doesn't have an injury designation.
Yeah.
Just kind of missed a touchdown last week against this tough Houston team.
Mm-hmm.
He now faces a Colts passing defense just a defense in general that's bad, but just a terrible, terrible passing defense. I think Caleb Williams is going to be the most functional we've seen. Wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if Rome has a decent game. So
Yeah, I like that. I like that call. And I'll just mention we know Olave and Devonta Smith in the Eagles Saints game, but don't forget about Rashid Shaheed.
yeah,
He's not just getting like the long bombs and that's it. I mean, his target share is decent, and he's got 5 and 4 targets respectively, and he's cashed it in both times. But very involved, and we can attack that Eagles defense any which way. So that's really nice as well. Any other call outs that you wanted to mention?
that is mainly it from like the cheaper receivers. Dell, Shaheed, and then going down the guys I mentioned.
Yeah.
That I'm really going to focus on.
Okay. Let's talk afternoon only and talk about, we have the 49ers decimated by injury, Rams decimated by injury. So that's one of the games. Then talk through some of the other games as I pull this up.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up as well. But no, this is definitely that game, which even at the beginning of the week, even with the Cup news, that game looked so much more promising. But now with no
Like a
Kittle,
Purdy stack looks so
yeah,
promising with like, of course, Mason in a good spot, then you could like do, or Purdy, Ayuk, Kittle, and now it's like with just Ayuk, if that's what it is, that's rough. So
Yeah. So, I do think you can look for value on San Francisco now, like a Juwan Jennings at wide receiver. I
yeah.
think you can, maybe take a shot at Saubert at tight end as, just a stone min tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's Mason's really the only guy that I'm really interested now in San Francisco.
Oh
Maybe a
yeah,
little
you're right.
Ayuk.
It's a full doubtful tag now. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
Oof, that hurts. That hurts. Best ball. That hurts. What I liked for DFS. We had the prop party show. Check that out. It was with Tyler, Steve, and I yesterday talking props. We liked Kittle for his yards and a touchdown because again, when McCaffrey and Debo are off the field, Kittle obviously gets a big bump in usage. So that is just so rough and just makes that game just so much less appealing. Okay, so
Yeah.
we've got Carolina, Vegas, Miami, Seattle, of course, without Tua, Detroit, Arizona, Baltimore, Dallas, San Francisco, LA, which we just covered, is just decimated with injuries all around. So, how do you approach this slate, Steve? I'll just throw it out there. I love Dallas stack by far in this, and then filling in pieces around it. What are your thoughts on this afternoon slate?
Yeah. So the other big piece of news that kind of changed this slate is, of course, Bryce Young getting benched and Andy
Right,
Dalton stepping in.
right.
This not only you're not going to really play Andy Dalton in the main slate, but in a 5-game slate,
Yeah.
becomes a little bit more interesting. But what it really becomes interesting are guys like Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, even Chuba Hubbard.
Mm-hmm.
Carolina just didn't have a functioning offense. They couldn't complete passes, couldn't get into the red zone. Now these guys should be much more viable. Even though I still think they're likely to lose, I think they can at least make a game semi-competitive. So
Yeah.
just I don't think the prices on any of these guys are reflective of Andy Dalton now starting at quarterback. So I think we're getting some value there. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But I'm with you. Dak and then Kyler are the two guys that I'm, really focused
Was
on. Lamar.
worried about Kyler against that Detroit front. I mean, we saw that because I was all over everything Baker last week, and Baker's obviously just the Bucks look amazing to start the season. But even with a great offensive line, Aiden Hutchinson is just a monster, and that defensive line is tough. We know Kyler can scramble, but does that make you a little concerned at all?
I mean, there's no doubt Detroit's defensive line is better, but their secondary is still pretty weak. And I do think Kyler is, he's a guy who he doesn't have maybe the same rushing upside as like a Lamar or Jane Daniels or some high end rushers, but he's a guy who's good for 40 to 60 yards a week rushing. He gets touchdowns sometimes. So, he could, again, on a short slate like this, that could be enough to spike him. If he gets 50 yards and touchdown on the ground, throws for another 200 and two, you're just talking about probably the top QB1 on this slate.
Okay. Okay, so
Um,
let's summarize the quarterback position. You on a short slate, you would consider Dalton based on he's just 4.8.
yeah,
Obviously, can elevate. Then you love Dak stacks. Dak Prescott, obviously Lamb stacks, and then Kyler's your next favorite. I assume Kyler and Dak are your two favorites. Dalton for cheap, and then you said you were considering Lamar as well.
yeah, no, I think you can play Lamar just in a game that, again, his rushing floor helps him
Yeah,
big time, and yeah, if they're playing from behind as expected, um, I think he'll be having to throw a lot. So,
yeah.
um, just some upside and potential there.
No, and what's nice, with Lamar, you don't have to really force many stacks. If you want to, go for it. If you don't, I think you can do Lamar and Lamb or Lamar and some Dallas pieces, and just say
Yeah,
he has to put the team on his back because, I mean, I guess the first game, obviously Lamar put up big points against the Chiefs, 29.1. It was likely, so you just have to pick your right one, and I think that it's a little tougher with the Ravens this year. Whether you go Flowers, Andrews, likely, how you approach that with Lamar. On a short slate, if you like other pieces, I don't mind not forcing it and then, doing it more in the bring back and stuff. So how do you want to build this one, as far as stacking this one up and building a shell?
I think we should go Dak.
Yeah, good. I was hoping you'd say that. Okay, so Dak 6.6K. That means we're automatically Lamb 8.8K. But I've talked about on multiple shows this week. We talked about in the prop party. Love Dak's props, CD Lamb's props. Talked about that. Will likely be in the Dove Club emails tomorrow. The the Ravens gave up, a good bit to Mahomes and Rice from the Chiefs, and Minshew and Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers last week. So this Ravens secondary is not a team to be scared of like we maybe were in past years. So absolutely love Prescott, Dak, and Lamb to start. Where would you go from there?
So this is where it gets
And while
interesting.
you're talking, let me just say hi to Albert. Thank you so much for joining us. Always good to see Albert in chat. Hello to you as well. We're now talking afternoon only. We started with Dak Lamb. And so go ahead. You said this is where it gets interesting. What were you saying?
So, running back, there's a lot of good options, particularly if Walker and Mostert are out, then those are, one-man backfields.
Yeah.
But there's not, what I would call much value.
Right.
So I think you can approach it, if you're doing Dak Lamb and you want to go a chain, which makes a lot of sense. I kind of like paying down, at least at Mason, if not Charbonnet, and then the true cheap option.
I think Mason is still a free square, even though now they're more decimated. So
yeah.
Okay.
But the one like true cheap option that I think makes some sense is Zamir White. Carolina has been absolutely shredded on the ground. White has, while Madison's gotten the touchdowns, White has gotten more carries and more targets. And this is by far the easiest matchup he's faced. So that is one way to approach getting a cheaper running back. Hubbard also, I think, is in play now, like I said before.
Yeah.
But I think we should do a chain Mason, but that means we really have to go cheap everywhere else.
Yeah, and I did really, really like Brock Bowers. I mean, he's still reasonable, but he's 5.4. So you could also run back Andrews or Likely. I put in the Seahawks defense, just obviously going against Skylar Thompson, but they are 3.5K, and there's really not, defense is so valuable, I don't really overthink it, but there are not a lot of cheap defenses to necessarily love in this situation. Unless you want to take a shot on Miami or something like that. But did you want me to plug in another defense or keep the Seahawks?
Keep the Seahawks. The defenses on this slate, the ones at the top, Raiders, 49ers, Seahawks, are all really good, but you do have to pay for them. The ones down below, that don't inspire a lot of confidence.
Yeah. Okay, so if we do Zamir White, I don't think we have to jam Bowers. You do get probably some ownership leverage on if you want to go like a Likely, or you could double stack. Is Ferguson fully removed off the injury report?
It does.
Does not have an injury designation for Sunday's game. So, that's certainly interesting. It's definitely quicker than I thought, but the problem is, like you said, then you'd have to, are there any like cheap ones? If you did another cheaper tight end, we obviously know the cheap ones are the Rams, but they're not that cheap. They know, obviously, the situation. Marcus Robinson's 5K, Tyler Johnson's 4.7. And Whittington's 4.2. And then Tolbert's 3.8. So I will say, like, if you wanted to maybe like go from Zamir White down to Hubbard and then, do like I'm just making up some cheap receiver options. If you didn't do Ferguson, you wanted to double stack like Lamb Tolbert, that gives you like 4.4K, for a tight end spot. What do you think about something like that?
Yeah, I don't mind doing Likely. You can do Ferguson as well. I do wonder if they ease him in with Schoonmaker this week, just coming off an injury like that.
Yeah. And like I said, you could also not do Zamir White, do another cheap receiver, and then get like a Brock Bowers. Like Brock Bowers, that's another example. Is you do a Gene Mason, you keep the six. If not, if you were going to keep another running back, you'd have to bump down the defense likely to get anything that you'd feel comfortable with at tight end. So again, we're just showing different shell options. So this one is Dak, Achane, Mason, Lamb, Tolbert, double stack, Whittington, Bowers, Seahawks. I like that a lot. And then you have options at flex. Then I mean, again, there are cheap pieces. It's not
Yeah.
amazing, but there's Dortch, there's Ferguson. If you wanted to triple stack, there's again, if Dallas goes off in this one in a major bounce back, that's what won last week with the Cardinals. So you never know. So yeah, when you talked about Jennings, 4.1K, there's options here. So I actually kind of like this shell a lot, Steve.
Yeah, and if you tweak it a little bit and get a little bit more money some way or another, again, those Carolina receivers, Thielen at 5,000, Deontay Johnson at 4,900, those are underpriced to me, given the new situation. So those are definitely guys I'm looking at up even a little bit higher. If you want to, double stack a different way and just do Lamb Cooks, you can do it that way. So just keep those in mind, because I do think there's a lot of options on these teams that we really like, and then there's some value on the teams that we're maybe not as thrilled about.
Spread, let me know if my mic sounds a little better if you're still listening. Steve, how come you didn't let me know that my mic sounded like shit?
I couldn't tell.
It's happened 2 days in a row, and I'm so frustrated. It happened yesterday morning. It's like if I redo anything on my computer, or I restart my computer to then get the Ethernet to see it, then my microphone goes down automatically. So it's fun. I love tech stuff. It's so frustrating. Okay. So as we end the show, you guys can finally hear me, so that's good. But any final thoughts, Steve, before we get out of here?
No, I mean, like I said, there's a few key teams to target on this slate, and then fill in around them with the cheap pieces.
Okay, so again, summarize the key teams to fill that you're targeting on this one outside of Dallas.
Yeah, Dallas, Arizona, Baltimore.
I'd say Detroit as well. I mean, I actually
I like the Detroit side as well.
I mean, we didn't even mention them. I think you can't go without mentioning. You have Jameson Williams at 4.8K. Obviously, you have to pay up for Amon-Ra. Or Laporta hasn't shown it yet. I'm not going to pay for it, but it could happen anytime. But 6K for a tight end that hasn't shown it, not really interested. Or you could go to like a Gibbs, Connor if you didn't want to pay for a chain. Gibbs, Montgomery. Montgomery is 6.1K. I know you talked about liking him and his anytime touchdown. So yeah. I think I just wanted to make the Detroit call out, because I do think that's another team that I actually like better. I think Detroit could have a nice bounce back, and Arizona could have a letdown spot. So I actually am higher on Detroit than Arizona in this one, and don't mind fading Arizona all around in a certainly tougher defensive matchup. I actually like, if you did Kyler, I wouldn't mind running him naked, but just because, again, if he gets there, I think it's going to be a lot with just scrambling around and trying to evade Hutchinson in that crazy rush. So anyways, but I know, again, I think there are some really key spots here too, like Jordan Mason, the cheap Rams receivers. We love Dak, Lamb. Bowers is in a great spot. So I just think there's good, more than anything, I think there's just really good spots to pick here.
Yeah, there's a lot of value here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value. You mentioned it with like Jennings. I talked about Tolbert. We both talked about the Rams receivers. So there is value. There's even some cheaper running backs, but outside of Mason, unless you're punting off the second running back and not playing like in a chain or Gibbs or Montgomery, there is I don't know that I do 3 running backs, because then there's just so many cheap receivers. So again, it's like the nature of the slate. Does it make sense to do? I think this makes sense to do just 2 running backs, and I do think Mason should be one of them, the spots. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Any final thoughts for week 3, Steve?
No, I think that rounds it up.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Again, check out all our content on fanspeak.com, the NFL betting card, the link to the Dub Club for a 7-day free trial on all other alts, props, anytime touchdowns, parlays, all sorts of show summaries. Check that out. And of course, check out everything on the FanSpeak Network. This is the first show today. Then at 6 o'clock, in just 11 minutes, I am going to be joined by the DGen Doc Sebastian Fearon, and we are going to have wagers with friends, which is awesome. And then 9:30, of course, the DGen Dads. So two DGen shows tonight. So check that out. And then Dove Club will be sent tomorrow if you want to check out that 7-day free trial. This is fun as always. Good luck in whatever you're doing, week 3, underdog dailies, daily fantasy, sports betting, all of it. We love it. Good luck. For Steve, I'm Meg, and we will see you next time.